So welcome everyone, all of the educators that are joining us today. This is week 4 of the Trimming Our Sails workshop series. We're going to be talking about microplastics. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anne to give us just a quick synopsis of the Zoom tools. We do have several people joining us today who have not participated in the workshop previously. So just a quick overview of the Zoom tools, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that she can take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Ginny. For all of you who've been on every week, this is a little bit of a review, but just reminding you about some kind of best practices we've been following that has made this go super great. Teachers are such great participants. So just remember at the bottom of your screen, if you take your cursor down, there's a bunch of different tools to explore. So those are definitely places to see, but most importantly, remember your mute and your stop video button, which are on the left-hand side of your screen. We're going to ask everyone to mute when we're in what's called the main room here. So please, you can go ahead and mute right now, but you're more than welcome to use the chat. We have been capturing the chat. I've been uploading it with some editing into your participant folder. So if resources are shared or ideas are shared, you'll be able to follow up in your folder and find those. And it's a great place to share resources, to put any questions for our scientists, things like that. When you go into your breakout rooms, many of you know that you'll go into your breakout rooms and you're welcome to unmute yourself and bring your video back, because those seem to keep, what we're trying to do is just keep our bandwidth, especially in the main room. It seems like if everyone mutes and turns their video off, it works really well. And I especially invite you, please, when you are in the main room, to keep your video off. And then just some other things, just note down at the bottom is the chat button, and there's the reaction button. So if you really like what you're hearing, you can always do a thumbs up like I did. We always like to applause for our scientists because we are so appreciative of them being here. So you guys are awesome. This is just repeat. So I'm looking forward to a wonderful day. Thanks, Ginny. Oh, and I'll turn it back to Ginny.
So thanks, Anne. Hopefully, again, we're at week 4, Trimming Our Sails workshop, and just a couple overview things. We have been introducing ourselves each week. Again, we do have new participants each time. So this workshop series is being hosted by Minnesota Sea Grant. Marty Kitson, Cindy Hagley, and Cole Fisher have been instrumental in helping to plan it, as well as Wisconsin Sea Grant. I'm Ginny Carlton. You just heard from Ann Moser, and Brenna Namer is our student and intern who's been helping all summer. A special shout out to Lori Hack, who's been our teacher consultant and has helped us to hopefully make this series meaningful to all of the educators, whether they're informal or formal teachers. We also want to remind you that you are now part of the Center for Great Lakes Literacy Network, and we encourage you to go to the SEGL website. We have a variety of different opportunities, both professional development and opportunities to look at what some of the other scientists across the basin are doing and have done in the past. So it's a really great resource. Also a reminder that grants have helped to support this workshop, so we appreciate their funding of our opportunities as well. Just a quick reminder that this session is being audio and recorded, so things that are written in the chat as well as the main room will be recorded and posted in the participant folder. I also want to ask you to think about this checking in question. We're going to show you a picture here, the common types of plastic that has resin codes, and we're going to ask Anne to go ahead and open the poll and see how much you know about these resin codes at this moment in time.
I just wanted to let Lorena know, Dr. Rios, I haven't seen Tania join the call. I just sent her an email, so I don't know if you've heard from her as well. So just wanted to let you know in case she doesn't show or is having problems, actually most likely having problems with her internet. I'll keep an eyeball peeled for her though.
Thanks, Anne. So it looks like we've got about 89% of the folks that have voted. So Anne, if you're able to share the results of the poll with our participants, that would be wonderful.
It says I'm sharing, so.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So wonderful that lots of folks know that these are associated with recycling, and in your particular community, some of these plastics may be recyclable and others may not. Some of the more common types of plastics we'll be talking about today during the scientist's presentation. And we also have some handouts for you that will help with that. We'll put a link in the chat in just a moment regarding that. The one that didn't really surprise me was that people were not familiar with the Wisconsin woman who came up with the idea for the resin codes. And her name is Millie Zantow, and Wisconsin Public Service has done some work about her. We're going to share a link in the chat that will provide you that information, some biographical information about her. So if everyone could then close their sharing poll results, you'll see a little box at the top in order to be able to do that. This is especially important for our science presenters, otherwise that will block your screen in the future when you're trying to share your screen. So if you can go ahead and close those results. And see if I can. I also want to provide a few other reminders to you that you'll find a blank copy of the action plan in the participant folder. We don't require one of these to be filled out for each workshop session. Again, this is for the entire workshop series. It's a questionnaire basically to ask you to consider how you may be using this material with your students in the future. We also have today in the participant folder, and hopefully Lori can now put this in the chat too, a link to a document called Common Types of Plastic. And this is the completed chart of the information that we just shared a few moments ago in the poll. And so you'll have an opportunity to see some of the names of the various types of resins, as well as some of the types of products that they're used for. And some of these names will come up during our scientist presentations today. So we hope that that will be helpful to you. Today we have a variety of different activities and support tools. A lot of this material is found in our participant folder. If you're having difficulty locating materials, or if you have other questions about either past or future workshops, please reach out to us either using the chat or email links. And with that, I'd like to introduce our three wonderful women who will be presenting our materials today. Dr. Lorena Rios Mendoza from UW Superior is a chemistry professor who has been working in this arena of plastics and microplastics and the chemical compounds that they contain and how they impact our watersheds, the life that is found within them, and of course humans as well. And then she has a graduate student who has just finished her doctoral program, Tania Pelamatti, who is based in Italy. And so this will be especially important when they start their presentations for you to have your video off today so that we can maintain as much bandwidth as possible for her presentation. She'll be talking to us about manta rays and how they've been impacted by marine debris. And then, as we mentioned earlier, Daniela Leon will be sharing the activity with us today. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Dr. Rios to take the sharing and start with the presentation. So thank you so very much for joining us all.
Okay, yeah. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity to talk about microplastic pollution. Today we talk about this pollution in the Great Lakes. I will do it, and how this contamination is connected to the ocean, and Tania will talk about. And finally, how we can analyze kind of easily in the classroom. Daniela will talk later about it. Okay, and then I just want to start the introduction with this 100% synthetic material. This is the bakelite. And this was a horrible plastic. I remember that. And I remember that nobody wanted to use it because it was dull and easily to break. Now we have this beautiful and colorful material, but when the plastic is more like a glass, and then is the worst material. And why? Because this can contain phthalates, and the phthalates make the plastics soft, but this can cause cancer. And now, the plastic that we are studying is synthetic polymers. This means it's come from the petroleum, and we can see how the production is increasing every year since 1930s. And the main problem is we don't know how long can stay the plastic with us. 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, I don't know, maybe forever. One of the scientific community goals is to know how we can relate the physics process, the biology process, and the chemistry process. In the physics, we want to understand how the fragmentation is doing, and in the biology, how the ingestion is affected the organisms. And we want to know how the plastic is related with the absorption of the toxic compounds. That this is my field. I'm working with this, with the chemistry. And we need to understand how all the physical properties that has the plastic is related, that give it the ability to absorb different toxic compounds, and this plastic and ingested by the organisms in the ocean and the freshwater system. And this is why we need to do ecotoxicity testings, because we want to know what is the happening in the organisms, but at the end that we want to know is what happened with the human health. Now, the microplastic that I'm saying, I'm starting to study this in 2003 in California. However, the microplastic is gaining a place in the science community. And still, we don't have a full definition about the microplastic, because we know that is the smaller particles lower than 5 millimeters, but we don't know what is the inferior limit. In Europe now, they are starting to study the nanoplastic. That is super difficult because the limitation of the analytical instrumentation to detect and do the identification of these tiny, tiny particles. Here is the metric scale. I just want that you give you an idea what is the sizes that I'm talking about. This is 1 centimeter. And then the definition of the microplastic is lower than 5 millimeters. But the problem starts here. In 1 millimeter means is 1,000 micrometers. And still, I can tell you the 500 micrometers, you can do the positive identification of microplastic under the microscope. But lower than that, you start to confuse so easily with natural particles. And this is why it's super important to know what is the identification of the plastic. Now, what are the sources of the microplastic in the environment? We can talk about 2 main sources. And I don't know if you see this. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because, okay, sorry. This is the primary source. That is the industry prepared the plastic in these micro sizes. because they want to use it in a variety of the uses, like pre-production plastic, the pellets, or microbead from the cosmetic products, or maybe in medicine. And we have the secondary sources, that is the fragmentation of the macroplastic to produce the microplastic. And this is the combination of the photodegradation with the mechanical breakdown. And always I like it to add one tertiary source, that is that I observe it in the ocean when the big animals bite it, are biting the plastic, and then they are doing the fragmentation. That I'm saying, when we study the plastic, is so important that we can say, we can have a positive identification of these synthetic polymers. And that we are using this instrument. We have the identification under the microscope, and then we are doing the analysis under this instrument, and we can know what is the fingerprinting of each different kind of plastic. Daniela will talk more about how is the qualitative analysis that we can do it in the microplastic in a classroom. My main interest in studying the microplastic is the chemistry, the persistent organic pollutants. These are my main compounds, and I'm working with three main families: polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PCBs, and pesticides, organochlorine pesticides. And this is the diagram of how the chemistry that we are doing here at the university. I don't know how to, okay. And you know, it's a little complicated, and I hope Tania can talk a little about her experience in the lab. That is not really easy. The analysis of the chemistry on plastic is so expensive and is very challenging, but it's super important. I'm started working with the microplastic in Lake Superior since 2011, and then we did the identification of the type of polymers. And here you can see some of the results. This was when the first time we can relate the concentration of the microplastic with the people, with the areas with more people. This means more people, more plastic. In 2012, we collected for first time in the Great Lakes in microplastic, Lake Superior, Huron, and Lake Erie. And in the Lake Erie, I did the analysis chemical of the persistent organic pollutants. Here is the results from the polyaromatics. And I remember that I did at the same time the analysis of some samples from Atlantic Ocean. And the concentration in the Atlantic Ocean was lower than the concentration in the Lake Erie. However, we need to keep in mind that the dilution factor, because the Atlantic Ocean is so huge and the Lake Erie is small and shallow. However, you have a more probabilities to eat one fish contaminated from the Lake Erie than from the Atlantic Ocean. In 2014, we did a collection again, Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, and Lake Erie. And again, we demonstrated that the plastic is behaved like a sediment and is absorbing all these kind of toxic compounds. But the most important here that we found it is how the plastic is grouped, yeah. And we see how this is the source from the lake, the rivers that go to the Great Lakes. And the most important was very evident, the wastewater treatment plant was the main point source for microplastics. Here is how we collected the samples in 2016 in San Luis River Estuary and Lake Superior. We collected with the manta troll. We did 1 hour of filtration, and we did the survey on the beach, 100 meters, and every 20 meters, we collect 1 meter square, we sieve the samples, and we follow the deposition of the organic matter. And this is one of the results that we found it in the Harden Island in San Luis River. Nobody, no human is living there, it's just the birds, and you can see how much, it's a lot of plastic that we found it. And I want to show you this sample that is from the wastewater treatment plant, 2 Harbors in Minnesota. And I want to show you is all these fibers that we found. We cannot count in all the fibers. And the result for this that I'm saying is a lot of fiber, but not all the fibers are really plastic. That we can see, this is the fibers, we take it, we have a bunch of fibers here, we need to take one by one and do the analysis. And for example, this fiber corresponds to the cotton, natural fiber. And this is for the polyester. This is the plastic fiber. But in this case that we found it was 60% of the fibers were plastic. This is the result in the same time with the chemical analysis. I know it's a lot of numbers, don't be scared. I just want to show you that the plastic is collecting all these toxic compounds, and these yellow dots are the concerned areas in San Luis River, and we can see how they collect a lot of this kind of plastic. This means for the PCBs and organochlorine pesticides mean is very old compounds that were there. Now, the question is, why do we need to feel worried? Why? Because we are doing this in the ocean. This is that we found it in 2014. You see, we are destroying the life outside. Okay, then let me see, go back. Okay, now, that NOAA is telling us all the time, you know, the marine debris is everyone's problems because we are the source of this plastic. We are participating in the International Beach Cleanup every year since 2013. And I can tell you this is a very nice thing to do it in all the planet this day, and it's a noble action, but it's not the solution because every year we are founded 85, 90% all the time the garbage is plastic. Okay, like a conclusions, I can tell you that the number one, the microplastics can absorb and concentrate and transport all these toxic compounds in the Great Lakes and in the same way that is in the ocean. And these sizes that we found in the Great Lakes is so tiny that can easily confused by natural food for the organisms in the lakes. However, we have more questions than answer at the point because we really don't know how long take, what is the kinetics that the compound that is absorbed in the surface of the plastic to go with the organisms. And then when this toxic compound is in the organisms, we don't know it is affecting just the, for example, the endocrine system in the fish, or when we eat the fish, the problem go with us. We have too many questions still, you know, and we don't know anything yet about the additives, the phthalates, all these chemicals that the plastic industry added to the plastic to make better products. We don't know what is the concentration that they are leaching, what is the concentration in the environment. And I just want to think in this very horrible prediction that for the year 2050 will be more plastic than fish in the oceans. This is really scary. What is that we can do it? That we can do it is use less plastic, try to keep the beaches clean because this is the main point that go to the lakes, to the river, to the ocean, and remember the 5 R's. I know you are teaching always 3 R's, yes? That is the recycle, reuse, reduce, but I want that you added 2 more, refuse. Don't use plastic if you don't need to use, and remove. If you find that the plastic, pick it up. Yeah. And I want to thank you to all my students that are working with me. And I know it's a very hard work, and Tania can tell you about it. And of course, Daniela, you know, they are normally crying with me because it's too much work, but we are doing something good. And I want to thank you for your attention. And I hope so, really hope that the next year you have the opportunity to go to the field and enjoy this wonderful and educative experience in the lakes. I don't know whatever is the lake that you can go. Now, I'm not sure if Tania is here, but let me introduce Tania Pelamatti. She will do the presentation talking about the pollution in the ocean with the, oops, giant manta
She hasn't
rays.
arrived, Lorena, so feel free to continue as long as you wish. She hasn't logged on yet, so.
Oh my God, she has a problem, and then in
Yeah, she's
Italy.
calling in from Italy, so bringing the Great Lakes, connecting it to the world, so.
Yeah, and I know she's trying to find a better internet. Oh, that's too bad, because Tania is related the microplastic pollution, but in the ocean, and the idea was to collect samples in the mantas, just the tissue, and see if they are concentrated phthalate, because the phthalates that I told you is the one of the chemicals that they put it in the plastic industry to make the plastic soft. And then if the manta are ingesting the plastic, the hypothesis was that these compounds can migrate to the tissue. This was the idea, to study this. And she collected sample in the ocean, and she found it, very low concentration, let me tell you. And this was totally surprised, kind of, but I know in all the Pacific Ocean, because we are taking samples in Ensenada below to San Diego, and she's in the Baja, in the very tip, in the Baja California in Mexico, and the archipelago is the Revillagigedo, is when these manta rays and the sharks are protected. And she collected samples there, and the concentration were low. And then we say, oh, this is so strange. Why is very low concentration? And I think it's because we, the Mexicans, we are very clean. Nah, just kidding. No, it's because the system, how the water is moving, is so fast, and then it's coming the California current that is the north to the south, and is moving to the North Pacific Gyre, and then it's cleaning all this area very fast, because Tania found close to the coast were higher concentration. This means and this is related with the hurricane, with the storm, and when the river is coming with the water, and then it's put the plastic in the ocean. And then this is why we prove it, that the system is moving very fast, and then it's cleaning. I don't know, I think so. What is that you want to do it now?
So
We can
I
go
think
to
we
the
should go ahead and ask
Daniela.
Lori to monitor the chat for any questions and have those addressed. And then we'll perhaps continue with Daniela and provide a little bit more time, hopefully, for Tania to join us. So we'll do the activity before Tania. So
If I
Lori,
can interrupt there, I'm sorry to interrupt. There is an iPhone connected. I don't know if that is Tania, if she would be able to call in.
I was using the WhatsApp, but there's no answer, and then I really don't know, you know. I hope so everything is okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
because she's just finishing his quarantine from Mexico to Italy. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we'll just, if she joins us, we'll adapt when if she's able to join us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Lori, are there some questions that we can address?
Absolutely. The first is, it seems like an important tool, Dr. Rios, in your research is manta trawl. What is a manta trawl?
Oh, this is a very nice question. Yes, the manta trawl is the net that we are using to collect the samples. Oh, what happened? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Is that we are using to collect the samples, and here is the manta. No. Oh, you see, this is the situation. Okay, this is the manta trawl. Yeah. Okay. And then you can see it's just the net, and the size of this net is 333 micrometers. And this is the mouth of the manta, and this is just the wings. You see the manta. Okay, this is the manta ray, yeah. And this is exactly the same. This is the manta trawl. This is the mouth, and this is the wings. And the 333 micrometers in the size of the net is because this is the same size that the manta has for filtration when they take the food.
Wow. Okay. So they actually use the organism to design the testing method.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right. Excellent. So Leah is wondering, she said she used to live in La Crosse, and she knows that La Crosse burns its garbage as a source of energy. I know Minneapolis does that too. What happens to plastics that are burned? Does any residue go into the river, or what happens to the residue?
It's not that the residue is going to the river, it's going to the atmosphere. And then we are producing these toxic compounds that are so easily applied. And then if we have a plastic, because we have a plastic everywhere, we have a plastic in the air, in the sediment, in the water, in the tissue, and then they can absorb all these toxic compounds because they're working like a sponge.
Grab my Bible and my computer and bring it to me.
Yeah, and then the problem is mainly the pollution that we are doing to the air.
Okay. And then the deposition of that. Okay. All right. Is there any, Anne wants to know, is there any analysis or research that directly connects plastic found in ocean environments to things in the Great Lakes? Have we seen that connection yet?
You don't see the connection?
Well, no. Have we found plastics in the Great Lakes that come from oceans or vice versa? Or is there a way to tell?
Okay.
I believe.
No, the source to the plastic in the ocean is the lakes and the rivers and the wastewater treatment plant, yeah?
Yeah.
But, and then for the Lake Superior, for example, the connection are all the tributaries, the creeks and the rivers that go to the lake. And then the lake is connected, and Superior is the cleanest lake, but you can see the Ontario that this is the only lake that I don't know, but Ontario is one of the worst lake with the microplastic pollution.
Okay.
And then this means, yes, it's connected and it's moving.
Yeah. All right, let's see. I actually had a couple of questions. So if you said that anything less than 500 nanometers was difficult to discern from the natural materials, is that possible? Or is it even like cost effective in research, or is it kind of not just worth it to look at those particles?
You know, this is the very nice situation that we have already in the science community, because we don't find yet what is the inferior limit in the microplastic, but we want to think the 1 micrometer, that is 1,000 nanometers, and for the nanoparticles is 1 nanometer. And then that you can see it is very, very tiny. But what is that we are doing? After that 500 micrometers, maybe 100 micrometers, we can analyze 10 micrometers, yes? But we need to pick it up one by one particles and use the instrument and do the analysis. It's kind of faster, it takes like a second, but still, if you have 1,000 particles in the time, is long time, and this is why it's very expensive. And when you can finish one sample of, I don't know, take long time. And then that we try to do it is do indirect or qualitative analysis using the diet. We can use the color, one indicator, and then we use the fluorescence, the microscope, and we can try to distinguish. But lower the size that we can see is that this indicator is working well, but still we have a false positives. And now in Europe, that they are doing is try to work with the technology, try to take the picture and use the FTIR and see it if they teach to the computer to distinguish by the colors, the type, the polymers, and then they can do very fast counting.
Okay, good. Sorry, I got my prefix wrong there. I wrote it down incorrectly. Do all plastics float, does the manta trawl pick up all of the plastics that are present?
No. In the manta, we just collected the plastic that can float, and Daniela will talk more about it, because we have a, Daniela will teach you what is the code, that is just the 7 number, but in reality, we have more than 5,000 different kind of polymers. And we have more than 60,000 combination of this polymer that is used in the plastic industry. However, it's just 2 main kind of plastic that is in all the planet is used. That is the polyethylene and polypropylene. And this can float because the density is lower than the density in the ocean, and it's very close to the density in the rivers in the freshwater system. And this is the plastic that we collected, but it's the main kind of plastic that is used in our society. But the plastic like for the computers, of the hard items, normally sink, like PVC, go
Sure.
to the sediments, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rios. Just in case we are able to have Tania join us, we're going to stop asking questions
Perfect,
now and move to Daniela's presentation. And then if she's not able to join us, we'll return to the additional questions that are.
I just saw
chat.
Tania. I just saw Tania has joined us.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect.
Yay.
So,
Ya me estoy con. Yeah, she said that she's here.
Yes,
okay,
awesome.
wonderful. So
Cool.
Tania,
Yeah.
we'll invite you to go ahead and
Well, let
start
me make-
sharing your screen, and we'll introduce you as you get set up. And please take a deep breath, right?
Yeah.
Our audience is a very friendly audience. We know that you've had some difficulties, and we appreciate all of your effort to join us today. So you just take a time to get ready. Yeah, not so well, but if you speak up maybe with your headset, we'll let you go ahead and get ready. Yeah. And as soon as you are, you can share your screen and we'll know that you're ready to begin.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, that's a much better volume. We're getting better. Thank you.
Yes, here we are. Oops. Okay. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay, then go ahead and start your screen by clicking the usually green button at the bottom that says share your screen.
Perfect. Okay, here we are. Okay, sorry for the delay. I've had some connection issue, but here I am. I'm Tania Pelamatti, and I just finished my PhD working with oceanic manta rays with Dr. Lorena Rios. And so I'm gonna talk to you a little bit today about the connection between the lakes and the oceans. And I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about how the plastics are harming our oceans. So as I said, I'm a marine biologist, but I was born in Italy, and actually that's where I am now. And so I was born actually in the Alps in Italy. And in 2014, I traveled to Mexico for an internship that was gonna last for just 9 months. But then it ended up in a PhD, and so I've spent the last 6 years in Mexico. And so in Mexico, in the Pacific side of Mexico, I've been collaborating with this NGO, Pelagios Caconja, that is dedicated to the conservation of sharks and rays in the Mexican waters. And so during these periods, I've been able to work with sharks and rays. And here you can see we have been doing some monitoring of sharks in marine protected areas. And we have also tagged some sharks. So we basically place some transmitters on these animals. And this way we are able to understand their movements. And so you can see here how a baby shark is released during one of these activities. So these animals go around and we know how they move, what they do, and what are their preferences. So here I'm gonna show you a video. Let's see, oh no, the other one. Okay, here it is. So here there is a video that I've taken during one of the monitoring of whale sharks in the Gulf of California. And I've seen during this period in the ocean, I've been able to see how plastics are threatening the ocean and the oceanic creatures. So here you can see, in this video, you can see a whale shark that is entangled in a net. And here we have been able to remove the net from the shark during this activity. And so I've also had the opportunity to swim with oceanic manta rays. Here you can see how big and beautiful they are. And so they are very, very iconic species, and they are vulnerable to extinction. So the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, has actually listed them as vulnerable to extinction. So they are a species that is in risk of being extinct in the future. And that's because they are, for example, endangered by the fisheries. So they sometimes happen to fall into nets. So they can fall very easily into the nets in the oceans, even nets that are abandoned at sea. And so they can get entangled and be threatened and die also because of that. And in some places they are even catched and fished for their meat. So they are very big animals that can sustain a lot of people. And so in some poor places, in some poor countries, they are even fished directly. They are targeted in the fisheries. And so they happen, that's why they are vulnerable. And sometimes they even, most of the mantas that are caught around the world, it's because of their gill plates, because they have a very high value in the Asian market, because they are commercialized as how do you say, as traditional medicine. And so they are used even if there is actually no scientific proof of that, but they are used in traditional medicine in Asia. But in fact, their gill plates are used by the mantas for filtering the ocean. And so they filter big volumes of water with those gills. So they open their mouth, and as you can see, those animals that are zoomed in the upper corner, they use these small animals. So they filter the ocean, they filter the water, and these small animals are their food. So they take out the food from the water, and so they can sustain and get very, very big. And when I saw for the first time their size and their mouth, I started thinking about all the plastic that we have in the ocean. And so I started thinking about, are the mantas ingesting plastics? Because we have a lot of plastics floating in the ocean. So what is happening with manta rays? And that's how my PhD project was born in 2015. And so I started this PhD in the Mexican Pacific Ocean. So as you can see, in the Mexican Pacific Ocean, there are two places, very important aggregation sites for manta rays. One is a coastal area. As you can see here, it's called Banderas Bay. And the other one is a group of 4 islands in the middle of the ocean, very beautiful and pristine area called Revillagigedo. So in both areas, we have been doing sampling of plastics from the surface. As you can see here, we are trolling the net. Dr. Rios, I'm sure that she showed you how you collect floating plastics in the ocean. And so we have done it, and after the collection, here you can see a manta net in action. And after the collection, we have stored our samples frozen. And lately, once back from the ocean into the lab, we have been physically separating under the microscope. So here you can see a dissecting microscope with the tweezers. So you separe one by one all the plastics that you see in the sample. So in the upper corner, you can see an example of a sample with, you can see some zooplankton, and some plastics are very, very easy to distinguish. As you can see, the green one, that is like obviously a piece of plastic because it doesn't look like any natural thing. But some plastics are very difficult to recognize because sometimes they look like plastic, but they are not. For example, the white pieces that you can see there in the picture, it could be plastic, but also not. So to discover if that's plastic or not, and which type of plastic it is, we use this FTIR, that is the apparatus that is in the center, in the lower center, that we have been using in the University of Wisconsin Superior with Dr. Lorena Rios. And we have been analyzing the sample to see if the plastic is actually plastic and which kind of plastic it is. It's a very long process and very complicated. And then we have also analyzed these plastics for understanding which contaminants, which pollutants were absorbed on these plastics. So these are the results that we got in Banderas Bay, so in the coastal area of Mexico. We have done complete years of sampling, and we have seen that during the summertime, during the hurricane season, we had some spikes in the abundance of plastics. And so we have found differences between the hurricane season and the dry season. And so we started thinking about why is there more plastic in the ocean during the hurricane season. Well, our hypothesis is that during the dry season, all the plastic is accumulated on the riverbeds that are empty, that there is not that much water. And then during the hurricane season, when there is a lot of rain, then all the rivers take all the plastics from the mountains and the cities that are even far from the ocean, they get to the ocean. And there they can harm all the animals that live in there, okay? We have found more or less the same thing happening also in Revillagigedo, in the islands that are in the middle of the ocean. But during the hurricane season, we were not able to go and take the samples because it's a very exposed area. And so it's very, very dangerous to go and sample this area. But even though we were able to see what happens during the hurricane season, we saw that after that period, there was a spike in the abundance of plastics, of floating plastics. So it's happening also here, but there is no people living there. So what is happening? Where is these plastics coming from? Of course, it's coming from the currents, from the ocean, right? So as you can see here, you can see all the currents that are in our ocean, the surface currents. And so it's easy to understand how all the oceans are connected. So we have currents that connect every ocean to the other, and the lakes are connected to the ocean through the rivers, right? So what I think is very, very important to let people understand that even if they are far from the ocean, they can have an impact on the oceanic animals. So for example, as you can see here, this bottle of plastics that is thrown in Lake Superior can have a very long journey and can even end up in the mouth of a manta ray in the Mexican Pacific Ocean, because all the oceans are connected. And so that's, I think it's the most important thing that we have to let people understand in order to feel that everyone have an impact on the animals, even if they are far from us, okay? So I would like to suggest a resource that I think is very, very interesting. So during this quarantine, I've been able to do some online courses, and I'm an Explorer, so I have this connection with National Geographic, and there is this resource in the website of National Geographic in the education area, where there are many courses that are open to everyone, especially to educators. And so you can take a course. It's like, this one is 25 hours course, and it's called Collecting Data to Explore Plastic Pollution in Our Communities. So I think it's a very, very interesting tool for educators. And so I suggest you to have a look there, because there is a lot of information about plastics, and also many interesting ways that you can put this topic into your classes and make it very interesting to your students. Okay, so thank you very much. And if you have any question, I'm available, and sorry again for being late.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. Pelamatti. We really appreciate your extra effort today. We know, we don't know exactly what happened, but we are so ever grateful for your extra effort to join us this morning. And we have been collecting some questions in the chat, and we'll save them for right now. We're going to turn to Daniela and let her share the activity that teachers may be able to use in their classroom, because obviously they don't have the wonderful lab equipment that's available at UW-Superior. So Daniela, if you can go ahead and prepare to share your screen, we'll turn it over to you. And thank you.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Daniela. Yes, Daniela, we
you.
can. And Lori, if you could go ahead and put that handout link in the chat, that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Oh, which one? Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniela Leon. I'm currently an undergraduate student majoring in biology and minoring in chemistry. And today I'm going to introduce you an easy and common method for plastic debris identification. This method could be easily applied for any type of student, including high school students. But first, did you know that 1 pound of the most common pellets cost about $1 and contains approximately 25,000 pellets? But what are pellets? Thermoplastic resin pellets are the most common and raw form of plastic that later can be melted or manufactured in order to produce a common good. Due to its high production in 1988, the Society of Plastic Industry developed this resin identification code with the aim to create a system that could be applied to all recycling programs. However, it has been mostly used to identify the kind of resin plastic that has been used to manufacture a final product. In the plastic industry, there are 6 common types of resins, with a 7th one which is classified as other. The common type of plastics are polyethylene terephthalate, really common in plastic bottles, high-density polyethylene, low-density polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, which is really common in tubes, polypropylene, and polystyrene, which is really common in food containers. Here in this slide, I'm going to show you some of the microplastics found in the Pacific Ocean and some microplastic pellets in the Great Lakes. In this first picture, I'm showing you the different microplastics found in the Pacific Ocean. As you can see, we have plenty of colors. In this second slide, we can see microplastic pellets, which are commonly colorless. And on this third picture, I am showing you some other type of pellets that some of them have colors. As you can see, some blue, black, and yellow pellets. As Dr. Rios and Tania previously mentioned, the technology we have been using in the lab is a little bit more complicated, but don't worry. After this, I'm going to introduce you the easier method to identify microplastics. The instrument I have been using is known as ATR, FTIR, Attenuated Total Reflectance Fourier Infrared Transform Spectroscopy. But how does this work? So I use a crystal, a germanium crystal, through which some light will pass through and penetrate the sample that have been placed on the slide. Once this sample have some light, it will bounce back some infrared light to the detector. The detector will provide us a spectrum that we can use to compare to our library. The library will show us a percentage of match that we can use to compare and identify the type of plastic. However, for an easier method, we can use the physical properties of plastics. In this case, and for this laboratory experiment, we're going to take into account density. Density is one of these physical properties that we can use to identify the type of plastic. For example, if a plastic is denser than water, it will sink. If it's less dense, it will float. Here I have a picture of the different densities of the plastic pellets. For the laboratory practice, we have as an objective to identify the kind of synthetic organic polymers by using their physical and chemical properties. The reactants that we will use will be alcohol isopropyl to the 70%, acetone, corn oil, and resin virgin pellets. I want everyone to see my screen. I'm going to show you some of the resin virgin pellets. They look like this. I hope everyone can see them.
So look where your people are. Yep, good, thank you.
And those are the ones we're gonna be using for the laboratory practice. The procedure is divided into two big parts. The first one involves the physical properties of plastic, as I mentioned before, density. This first part is divided into three different tests: the water test, the isopropyl test, and the oil test. In the second part, we're going to address the chemical properties, in this case, solubility of these plastics, by performing the acetone test. Here I have attached the flow chart that we will be using for our lab experiment. I have also placed the picture of the densities for the 6 different types of resins and the 7th one, which in this case will be nylon. As you can see, we have both high and low density polyethylene, polystyrene, polyethylene terephthalate, polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, and nylon. I have also labeled the different densities for our physical properties test. This test starts with the water test, taking into account a density of 1 gram over milliliter. So based on this, the ones that have a heavier density will eventually sink, and the ones that have a lower density will float. Taking into account this, the ones that will sink will be polyethylene terephthalate, polyvinyl chloride, polystyrene, and nylon. The ones with a lower density, such as high density polyethylene, low density polyethylene, and polypropylene will float. So in my screen, I'm going to show you the results for the water test. I hope you can see that some of them are in the bottom and some are floating. Now, in order to make a distinction between high-density polyethylene and low-density polyethylene, we can make the same physical property test using isopropanol to the 70%, which has a density between 0.88 to 105 grams over milliliter. After performing this test, we will be able to identify one that will sink and 2 others that will float. In this case, the one that will sink will be high-density polyethylene, and the 2 that will float will be low-density polyethylene and polypropylene. In my screen, I'm going to show you how that identification looks like. So one is floating and the other one has sink. Now, in order to make a final distinction between low-density polyethylene and polypropylene, we can use the corn oil test. We take into account a density between 0.91 and 0.92 grams over milliliter, where one will sink and the other one will float. At the end, our test will look like this. So the one that will sink will be low density polyethylene, and the one that will float will be polypropylene. So we have completed half of our table, taking into account those plastics that have lower densities than water. Now we can proceed to those that are heavier. We can use the glycerol test, taking into account a density of 1.26 grams over milliliter. Those with a heavier density will sink. In this case, we will have polyethylene terephthalate and polyphenol chloride. And on the ones that will float, we will have polystyrene and nylon. Here we have reached the part where we're gonna take into account the chemical properties of these plastics. As I previously mentioned, we're going to address solubility by performing the acetone test. This will show us if a plastic dissolves or doesn't dissolve. In the first part, for those that had a heavier density, so polyethylene terephthalate and polyphenol chloride, the one that will dissolve will be polyphenol chloride, and the one that wouldn't dissolve will be polyethylene terephthalate. And for those with a lower density than glycerol, the one that will dissolve will be polystyrene, and the one that wouldn't dissolve will be nylon. At the end, our flow chart will look like this. We have identified the 6 different types of resins and a 7th one, in this case, nylon. I hope you find this lab practice useful for your high school students and for any type of students. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was really a practical way for some of the educators to potentially help their students identify the different types of plastics. And it was really helpful seeing the resin chart at the beginning with the different types of plastics. We are going to take a very quick break at this point, a 5-minute break. Thank you so much. And when we come back, we're going to be in breakout rooms, and we'll ask if our scientists are still available to join us in those rooms. The purpose of the rooms is to have an opportunity to talk with one another about how we might be able to use some of the information that has been presented, including the demo, but things from the actual presentations as well. So we'll reconvene at about 3 minutes after 10. And at that time, we'll indicate how you can find the link to join the breakout room. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you shortly.
I did have a question, just quick. Marty, are you still available?
Yes, I'm available.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our presenters, the 3 wonderful women scientists who have shared so much of their life's work. Some of the careers just getting started, our undergraduate students, some moving into new professional realms, with Tania just completing her doctoral degree, and of course, the ongoing work of Dr. Rios. We're so appreciative of the knowledge that you're collecting on society's behalf and your willingness to share it with all of us today. The next portion of our time together will be going into breakout rooms. The link for those rooms is in the chat. That's where you'll be recording information from your session. So we ask that one person from each of the groups serve as the recorder. There's a Google form associated with the bit.ly at 20 Sturgeon link that we ask one person to complete. And then ideally someone else from the group will provide a 1 to 2 minute summary of your group's discussion when we return to the main workout room, main room in just a few minutes. We will complete our session today at 10:20 so that we do have some time to share with the group. So you'll have a little bit less time in your breakout room today than normal, but I hope that you have fruitful discussions. Please look for a link at the bottom of your screen asking you to go to that breakout room. You do need to accept that invitation in order to move to the new location. So I think, Anne, we're ready for that to happen, and good conversations, everyone. Thank you, everyone. I hope that as you're returning into the main space, that you had a wonderful discussion in your breakout rooms. It does usually take just a few moments for everyone to return, so we'll just wait a second. But group number 1, you will be sharing first some of the things that you talked about with your scientists. So if Kate can get ready to do that, that would be lovely. And we'll turn it over to Kate. It looks like everyone is back.
So we had I really enjoyed talking and listening to Tania some more. We covered tons. We talked about the difference between microplastics and nanoplastics. It's something I had heard about, and she did a great job of helping us understand the difference. So, so there was that. We talked about a review that it's not just the size of the plastics, but that the plastics have chemicals in them and on the outside of them, and about the consequences of that. We talked more about the lab and about having, so our group was elementary, differentiating between biological material and plastics if we were looking at a sample, for example, so that was helpful. We were reminded that we could maybe look at plastics just on the shoreline. So it's not always easy to get out into the water with large groups of little ones, but we could do some shoreline work too. Tania was great about reviewing how the plastics get from that bottle to the little pieces, you know, that it's the UV action, and that fits great into 4th grade science. And it's also the physical weathering. We also looked at approachable for elementary kids by, Jenny talked about the new trash trunk, and that could be an option through Sea Grant. And Tania also reminded us about, you know, we could just take some unknown plastic like out of a recycling bin and using that with the lab if we maybe didn't have access to samples or whatever else. And we also talked about cleaning up, because I could see kids saying, well, let's just filter it out like a water filter, and that, you know, and why, you know, that it has to start with us and it has to start with them, right? And using that recycling bin like it should be, and not letting things fly out the car door when it opens up. So I really like the analogy about a clean room, and I'm sure I'm not going to do it justice, but it doesn't pay to clean your room if you're going to leave the door open and let all of this junk back into it. And I could maybe apply that to my own 2 teenagers, but that might be personalizing it. But it was a really great conversation, and I took oodles of notes, and it was very motivating. So that's what we did. Thank you, Tania.
Thank you so much for the group 1 share. We'll move on to group 2, which I'm not sure whether it was elementary or middle school today. So if whoever is sharing for that group could let us know, that would be helpful too. Thank you.
I think that was us, but cut me off if I'm wrong. And us being the middle school group, this is Carly. Oh, Marty's telling me maybe I'm not next.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Nope, that's my bad.
We're group 3.
Okay.
My group is group 2, and we had art teachers and then some informals. So if anyone from my group would like to volunteer to share out, that would be lovely. If not, I can also do it here. So we discussed in the art classroom, reusing materials and whatnot. And then Leslie also talked about picking up garbage in the kids' communities, and then discussing the big picture of plastics and doing the activity. We also talked about doing multimedia art, since things are moving online, and building kits and then bringing them to houses or having parents come pick them up for activities for kids to do. And then discussing what each plastic is and how it impacts the environment, and kids could even use plastics that are in their own community, so they get out and actually clean up a little bit in their community, and then use that plastic and then recycle it, obviously. And then we kind of just discussed how things might vary with this topic and this activity depending on grades and homeschooling and whatnot, because our group had a wide range of age group and audiences. So
Thank you, Brenna.
yeah.
We'll move back over to Carly then with group 3 and the middle schoolers.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. We had a great conversation that a lot of it centered around the value of imagery, and how some of those images that Dr. Rios and her team shared with us were just really spoke a lot, especially to middle school students who like to visualize things so much. So the image of the plastic bottle moving around the ocean currents and how that connects to your waterways, that global connection. We also talked about looking at this as a service opportunity, and not stopping at it being a service opportunity, but maybe starting with a service opportunity to pick up and then continue it on a little bit is a really nice way to connect science to service. One of our participants mentioned this program called the Microplastic. It's a microplastic citizen science program, and she shared a link in the chat with us about collecting the particles and then sharing them. I think it's globally. We had another great idea to use the actual materials that you pick up as a physical bar graph. So just to do a simple sort of like, this is plastic, not even get down to as specific as our presenters were, but like, this is plastic, this is metal, this is glass, and just look at, for quantity or even per weight, how much of that you have for another great visual. And then how to do it remotely, and have maybe students watch some of these great presentations, because our presenters just did such a great job and we learned so much from them, to use their videos, hopefully in our classrooms, especially if we're doing an online learning community this fall.
Thank you so much, Carly. And we'll move to group 4, which I believe is a high school group.
I'm thinking that was our group. So Elizabeth, was that you?
Yep, it should be Cindy's group.
Yep.
Okay, so our group, we started off by talking about how a lot of the content today could be adapted for who we work with. We were primarily, I think, elementary and middle school mostly. One of our participants said that they used this with 3rd grade by collecting and sorting different materials. And it was also suggested that classrooms can do Adopt a Beach, examining how the plastics break down. And another participant mentioned that their classroom does a STEM project where they look at plastics in the water and create robots to collect. Some of the challenges that they discussed were that how small the plastic particles are and how it's difficult to collect. We also had another participant that talked about the 3 R's with relation to like breakfast utensils and how that amasses over time, and kind of creating a visual for the school. We also talked about the difficulties in campaigning for reducing single plastic use in the school school environment. And then we also finished off briefly by talking about the virtual environment, and somebody suggested that, you know, having maybe 2 demonstrators kind of discussing, you know, or doing the experiment online might be beneficial.
Great, thank you. And so I think we have one remaining group, the high schoolers. Is that correct? Group 5?
Yep. This is group 5. Hi, this is Mick. We talked a lot about, well, we started talking about how could we do this depending on whether we're actually back in school or not. But I think we had some great ideas for how kids could actually do this if we're hybrid or distance learning or whatever, where they can actually get to these plastics. Nicole had mentioned that she had done a workshop this summer where you could actually, we can get through, at least the kids could probably get through 1/2 of that flow chart with using stuff that they've got at home. So they could use the water, and they could use the oil, and they could use the isopropyl. And in order to get them to get samples, they could go around the house and use hole punches to punch out different types of plastics that they know where they are, where they fit in those numbers. I think a big thing that kind of came out from ours is that we can use the whole COVID situation as a learning opportunity, because things are changing around plastics, right? A lot of stuff that was kind of going to people bringing things in, like bringing your own mugs and bringing your own glasses and bringing your own bags, has become not okay because people don't want to have to touch that stuff or wash that stuff and things like that. And so Dr. Rios brought up some ideas around that, where if we have kids start looking for this stuff, they're going to start seeing it more because of COVID, and also because China is no longer accepting our plastic. And so we're seeing a lot more plastic around. And that was an idea for kids to just 1 week write it down in a journal. What plastics are they seeing? And then you could move that out with different maths, like, well, if you're using this so much, how much is our school using? How much is our community using? And so on. And then the last one big thing that Dr. Rios brought up is that if you get a number 7, that's everything else, right? There's like 5,000 different possibilities of what that plastic could be. And to kind of bring that up with kids around too, is that if you get that one, there's all kinds of things that it could be there. So that's kind of what we came up with.
Ginny, before you switch gears, I thought maybe Cynthia from our group would want to just mention, she was talking about wishing she had people to collaborate with. And it's up to you, Cynthia, but if you'd like to just share that, because it relates to what Mick was just saying.
Sure, that would be great. I struggle with the fact that as an educator, I'm teaching my students one thing, but then in practice, we're doing another thing when it comes to all of the plastic utensils that we use for breakfast. We use them for lunch. It's just incredible. And then, it was brought up that, well, there's rules, but I think part of what we're teaching kids is to do inquiry and analysis. So we need to analyze the cycles and why things are the way they are. So if anybody's interested in doing some sort of a student-led campaign to do some sort of action to try to change this, if you would contact me, that would be great, because I know there was a time when we used silverware at school. So I can put my information in the chat room, but I'd be really happy, because I've wanted to do this for years, but I think it's bigger than I can do by myself. So thank you for giving me that chance.
And thank you to everyone for sharing some really wonderful ways of working with their students, both in a classroom setting, in our parks and nature centers, in potentially children's homes this year due to COVID. Really appreciate all your efforts. We're going to go ahead and take our break now so that we can transition to our joyful hour, where we have some additional workshops and ways that we'll be talking about different ways to use a variety of kits that are available from different lending sources. So we'll take probably a 3 or 4 minute break so that we can hopefully return closer to our schedule. Thanks again to our wonderful women presenters this week. So appreciate all of the work that you're doing and will continue to do on our behalf.
Ginny, We did have one more group, but I know we're out of time. So maybe we'll just make sure that our comments make it into like the Google Drive.
Yeah, I know we have some people from the Joyful Hour who are only joining us for the Joyful Hour this week, and so that's why I'm a little bit more conscious of time. So I do apologize for that, and I hope the last group will understand my concern about moving forward.
Sure. Just wanted to say that for anybody who's looking for those comments.
And welcome to everyone who's joining us back for the Joyful Hour. And yes, thank you to all of our presenters and those who were helping earlier this morning. We have 4 different breakout rooms today. Hopefully you had an opportunity to respond to the email that went out indicating your choices. Room 1 today will be discussing the watershed game with Cindy. Room 2 will be talking about Rove the Great Lakes, which is the remotely operated vehicles, with Anne and Marty. Room 3 will be the trash trunk and plastic panic, which I will be leading. And then room 4 will be talking about the Limno loan program with John, Kristen, and Carly. If you didn't have an opportunity to sign up for a breakout room, you will be kind of automatically assigned to one. And we ask that when the link is available that you go ahead and accept that invitation. Once again, if we could please have someone craft a complete the Google form. The address is in the chat. It's bit.ly/20 dragonflies. That's where you'll find the form for the Joyful Hours, and also someone to facilitate a discussion at the end. And we will try to get to all of the groups at this time afterwards. So with that, I think we are ready to go into the breakout rooms. Anne, are you ready to send us?
Yeah, just 1 minute. People get bumped out sometimes, so I'm just going to make sure everybody's back in the room that they requested. So just give me
okay,
one.
that's
I
fine.
don't know why. It just they bump them out. So okay, we're good to go. So I'm going to send you to your rooms. Enjoy your discussion.
Really encourage the recorder of each of the different sessions to do their best to fill out the Google form document so that we all have the all the beneficiaries of sharing in the information that has been shared in each of the groups. So I'm going to start with the reverse this time, just to change things up a little bit. So we're going to start with room 4, which is the Limno Loan Program with John, Kristen, and Carly. If someone from that group can share with us what they talked about.
I'm happy to share. We had a really great conversation. This is Carly, about using this very physical tool, but then using it if we're talking about using it in a hybrid way or in a virtual way, and talked a lot about looking at data that's available online through Gloss, or even if it was like calling a fellow teacher, Skyping with a fellow teacher and saying, you know, what was your data like? How can we compare the data that we've gotten instead of physically being able to go out there and collect it ourselves? And then John brought up a lot of good points about like, and Cynthia too, about really relating the water systems that they know, like the experiences that they've had in the water. So drawing on their personal experiences, which I thought was really a valuable idea. And just how great of a tool it is. And we hope everybody gets a chance to use the Limno Loan Program.
Can you tell us a little tiny bit more about what the tool is used for those people that weren't part of your group?
Oh, yes.
What is the main, yeah.
So it's a data sonde that's basically like it's like a third of a meter probably, like piece of technology that you sink into the water, and it gives you parameters on chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, what else? Depth, temperature. Yeah, it gives you all these different parameters so you can take different measurements of different water systems. And I was just thinking, oh, you have to do it in a lake or a waterway, but John was mentioning they test all sorts of water. So they look at the fish tank and they look at tap water, and, you know, just to get practice in looking at all those different parameters, and helping students to understand that water isn't just a liquid thing. It is a living, it's an ecosystem. And these abiotic parameters that we can look at can help us to relate the biotic life that we see there and what's going on. So it does attribute to, you know, the politics around your area, and, you know, are you allowed to use phosphorus or not? Or are you using road salt? How does that affect conductivity? All those different factors. Is that helpful?
Thank you. Yes. So then we'll switch over to group 1, which was the watershed game, the representative from Cindy's group.
So let's see, where is she?
Is that me, Cindy? I did the online thing, but
Oh,
I
there
can.
you are, Kate. Thanks.
Yeah.
I couldn't see her.
Yeah, I can report out too if you'd like. So we talked about the watershed game, which is a simulation that teachers can either purchase or borrow, or in need print also. And what it does is it gets your students to work cooperatively. They take on roles to make decisions about how to best protect their watershed. And you can get it done in the class period. It's really kind of aimed more for middle school. That being said, we talked about how it could definitely work down to 4th grade or even up to high school, certainly. Let's see, it has lots of roles. We talked about the community leader or the facilitator games that are also available, and how those look at lakes and kind of give it a broader view, I guess, of watershed protection. And we also talked about how the watershed game, because it kind of lets you make decisions based on how much money you have and what your goals are, and how to, you know, protect your watershed or protect the water, how it would work well with a watershed table. So we talked about that too. And then we spent some time talking about Sea Grant itself. And I learned a lot about, you know, what Sea Grant really is and what its goals are, and how it's, I don't want to say it's still surviving in today's climate. And we talked about, you know, what Sea Grant would like to do to kind of help people who are teaching, because this is a very unusual year we're going into. So our conversation kind of had a broad range, but I took lots of notes again, so it was very, very valuable. I hope I hit it all. Did I miss something, Cindy?
Well, I think that's great. The only thing I would add is that in your participant folder for the Joyful Hour are some fact sheets and stuff. So if you want to learn more about it, you can, and find out how to get one or whatever. Thank you.
And also continue.
Sorry.
Thank you. And also continue to monitor the chat. People are putting a variety of resources in as others are describing the conversations that were happening in their groups. So we'll turn to room 2, which was Rove the Great Lakes with Anne and Marty. If we can have whoever the report out representative for that group is, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to report out. We got to actually see an ROV and its parts, and we got to see some sample videos of actual ROVs that are studying invasive species, fish, and shipwrecks, which was really cool. We learned about the curriculum that goes with an ROV, the ROV curriculum, and how Joy uses it. And it's a really comprehensive curriculum that focuses on the engineering process. So students are challenged to solve a problem in the Great Lakes, and they design and test an ROV in a kiddie pool. Unfortunately, not in the real Great Lakes. And the students really are learning about neutral buoyancy and density in this lesson. So it's a really cool way. Density is hard to teach. The parts that you need can be done on your own, or you can borrow them for the students to make it. And they're actually making and testing multiple times so that the students actually are doing the engineering process, while they're creating their ROVs. We talked about how engaging it was, both for boys and for girls, that the students really got into this and got very inspired to do it on their own even. And that with Joy, she also talked about how the test, she conducted the tests outside. And so it generated a lot of interest in the community because people were curious about what the kids were doing outside. So I think that's sort of it.
Thank you so very much. And then our last group, room 3 with the trash trunk and plastic panic. I know that will be Eric sharing.
Actually, I think that's me, unless you want to, Eric.
I'm sorry. Yes.
That's
no,
okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nicole.
No big deal. Not a big deal. I was kind of hoping, I figured I'd take them off the hot seat.
Please.
So we talked about the trash trunk that is available for loan or will be shortly. Sounds like there's still a couple things they're figuring out on how to get it out to people with all the goofiness we're dealing with. Each state will have a set that they can loan out, so there won't just be one that has to somehow navigate all the states connected to the Great Lakes, so that's wonderful. 14 activities in it. They sound really interesting. You can scale them up or down depending upon your grade level and the student ability, so it really sounds like a great resource. One thing we did talk about with the resource is whether or not we've used trunks before from other organizations and how that worked, so there were a few ideas there. The one thing that we came up with is sometimes as teachers, it's tricky to plan ahead and know exactly when we're going to need the trunk. And so that was kind of a couple things we talked about there. From that conversation, we talked about a bunch of other things that we are curious about investigating. Some are citizen science related things like doing an Adopt a Beach and then using some of the tools that are in the trunk to even do a deeper dive into what kinds of things are being pulled off of the beach, especially things like out of the sand. And that could be on a lake or a stream or a Great Lake or the ocean. Ginny shared that there's the marine debris app thing that you can go look at that shows kind of where debris is in our oceans, and that there's a Great Lakes version right now in testing. So I don't know if you want to throw that up on the thing, on the links there. But they're looking for some feedback. So it'd be something to kind of poke around and see what it's like and share some information back. We talked about plastics being magnets for chemicals, whether they're in our groundwater, how much plastic we actually eat or consume or get in our bodies every day, what's attached to those plastics or is leached out of those plastics, how doing laundry can impact that. We had like a really wide-ranging conversation that basically went everywhere from groundwater to the oceans. So it was very interesting and a lot of interesting bits and pieces about how to study that and share that with students. I don't know if I covered everything because we really went all over the place, but if there's anything else, Leah or Eric or Idra, jump.
Thank you so much for all of the folks that were recording information in the Google Forms today, for all of those that you reported out for the various groups, and to all of you for sharing your knowledge with one another and just your interest in these topics related to the Great Lakes. Obviously, our next generation of students will be learning from you and from other educators, and we know that it may be a difficult year this year. We encourage you to think about the action plans that you will be putting and pulling together as you think about how you might integrate this material into your school and curriculum or your other learning environment. And to that end, we do have a mid sort of workshop evaluation. We're going to try to get that link in the chat, but it'll also be emailed to you, and I'll try to pull it up on the screen if you have a few moments to stay or to fill out that evaluation now. We'd really appreciate it, and that way we can get some information and perhaps make some adjustments as we move forward with the remaining 2 workshops. So thank you to everyone who participated today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.